Oh, it's wonderful to see the little ones growing up with such compassion, and it's great to be living a life of faith. It's hard to endure it otherwise. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I mean, her side of the family, the Biley side, is represented, the Jaynes family is represented, my work family from Binkley and Barfield out of Houston is represented, the owner of the company and his wife is here. My colleagues from my office in Houston are here. Aunts and uncles and brothers, my three brothers are here. And just everyone that had a part in caring for Linda, they're here. My nieces and nephews, my grandsons and granddaughters. It's just really an occasion, and I thank you for being here at this celebration, and that's truly what it is a celebration. We're going to be celebrating her life and some of the things that I say. And I'm going to spend maybe 10, 15 minutes talking about a few things. There'll be some things that even some of my children have not heard before, but this is probably an appropriate time to say them. So I want to thank each of you for being here today. What's been going on has been Linda's wishes. She planned this long ago, her cremation and how she wants me to distribute that. The ceremony today, the celebration of her life, she did not want a casket for you to walk by today and to see her and say, doesn't she look good? She didn't want that one bit. In fact, there's no urn here today, and you notice there's nothing but pictures, and there's nothing but video, and there's nothing but positive, and there's family and friends here today. I have a Jeep. I bought a Jeep a few days ago and brought it home from Houston because that's what she wanted. We've always wanted a Jeep, but she was physically not able to get in one. I couldn't get her in one. When we were on our last vacation, we had the opportunity to stop up in north of Chattanooga and buy a Hoyer lift because Jennifer said, we need to get a lift, Dad, to start picking her up out of the wheelchair and put her in the car. So when we got home, and she said, well, you know what, we can get a Jeep now because now you can lift me up and put me in it. Well, I just didn't have enough time to get the Jeep and put her in it. But that was her wish as well. And she'll always be my co-pilot. I'll always hear her saying, slow down, and can you stop at the next rest area? So we're looking forward to the life ahead. I want to tell you a little bit about our first hello and our last goodbye. I'm going to try to get through that. But it started back when we were in high school. She lives in Port Arthur, just right across the river, the Natchez River, from Bridge City where I grew up. We both graduated in '67, but she went to all the football games. I played football against her team as a sophomore, so she had to see number 24 running around scoring touchdowns, but she didn't know who I was. My junior year, we played them. Again, I'm on the field. She's probably watching. No contact. Same thing my senior year. Now, after our senior year, I went on to West Point to play ball there, and she left and went to bookkeeping school. And when I left West Point, I got married, and when she eventually got married and had a daughter, Jill, in November, I got married and had a daughter in December, Danielle, just 3 weeks apart. Still didn't know each other. I had an opportunity to go work at Woolco at the Amaron Automotive Company as a manager. They needed a good manager, or maybe a manager. So I was hired for the job. I worked there for 2 years, and so did she, and I never met her. She worked in the sporting goods department. I'm focused out there with tires and batteries and things. So I never met her. So I leave, and I'm promoted to the store in Birmingham, where I have 2 other children, Jonathan and Crystal. And then I get a divorce. She gets a divorce. I come back to the area. I lived in Groves, just right down the road here, in a house on Hanson Street. And that was a low point in my life. I got my West Point full dress uniform with marching hat and plumes and my saber and my cross belts. I got my football helmet from West Point and my jacket, and I went and put them in a dumpster. Because I was checking out, and it was tough. You know, I thought I didn't have anything to live for. Little did I know I had so much more to live for. Well, my uncle came and got me and took me to a church where Roddy Bland was the pastor at Aldersgate Methodist. I didn't know him, but I met him, and he talked to me for a little while, and he said, listen, tomorrow night we're going to have a singles class gathering over at the YMCA. Would you please come to the church and ride with me over to that? And I said, yes, I will. So I'm standing at the church the next day at the side, up by the door, just leaning there waiting for him to drive up. And I see a gray Thunderbird drive up in the parking lot, and this beautiful creature steps out and starts walking up the steps. And I'm thinking, I want one of those. And I saw she had a ring on her finger, and I thought, dang, somebody's a lucky guy. And she walked right on past me. I don't know if I even spoke to her, but she went on inside the church. And then Roddy drives up, and I go down to the car, and someone was in the passenger side, so I get in the back seat, and he said, well, we're waiting on one more. So I'm just sitting there, and I see the door open from the church. And here she comes down the sidewalk, and she's walking right to the car, and I'm thinking, whoa, what's this? She puts her hands on the car door and opens it, and I'm thinking, what's a married woman doing coming to a singles function? And she sits in the back seat, and she turns and looks at me, and she says, hi, I'm Linda. And I don't know if I said anything intelligent after that. We went to the function. I probably didn't hear anything that took place because I made sure that the seat was vacant next to me so she could sit next to me during that thing. And all the while, I'm planning my next move. And it was to take her to coffee if she'd go. So I asked her if she'd like to go get a cup of coffee, and she said, yes, I'd love to. So we went over to the Western Sizzler Steakhouse for coffee. And I just found out that Pat was working there at the time. My pastor didn't know that. Anyway, I know the time and day that we were there because I took a napkin from there that had their logo on it, the little steer horns, and it said Western Sizzler, and I wrote on there April the 7th, 1980. And a few months later, Linda found it, and she framed it for us and put it away, and I didn't see it again for maybe 25 years. I saw it just the other day when Jennifer got it out of her curio cabinet, and I looked at that and I thought, my goodness, that's when it all started. That's when God's hand of providence was upon me to take me from what I thought was the depths of despair to the greatest heights that I could ever think I could have emotions for. And then we had a wonderful life. I'll tell you about that in just a second. But the last thing I want to talk about is, here is our last goodbye. That was our first hello. I will say this. We did go to Freeport, Bahamas before we got married with my uncle and his girlfriend. The two girls, Mary and Linda, stayed in a room, and Curtis and I stayed in a room. And that's where I proposed to her. I asked her if she would marry me. And she said, maybe. So all the way home flying, I'm thinking, what do I have to do? And I'm sure eventually I did the right things. But here's our last goodbye. I don't know, did Lisa ever get here, our hospice nurse? Did Lisa show up? I'm not sure if she did or not. But Linda had been going downhill, and this last downhill that we were experiencing, we thought she was going to bounce back from, as she had on 4 previous occasions. When we were about to call the family in 4 other times, it was that bad. She rallied, she got better, and she was just a little notch below where she was prior to that. So these different notches of infections just knocked her downhill to where it was obvious she wasn't pulling out of this one. But I was there just the night before with Linda in the bed and the hospice nurse on one side, and I'm holding Linda's hand, and I'm noticing the feet are turning gray, the hands are gray, the head was gray, and so was the nose. I'm thinking, but she's warm, and so Lisa took her temperature, and it was perfect. She took her respiration, and it was good. Her heartbeat was good. Her blood pressure was good, and I said, why can't she live? And she said, it's God's time. No amount of work that a doctor would do to her at this point would have done any good, because when it's God's time, there it is. And so she told me something that I want to impart to you that may help you in the future with any of this type. She said, God is shutting her body down. He starts from the outer extremities that are no longer useful, because I know she got to where she couldn't even raise her hands. She couldn't even raise her arms. It was useless. So he was pulling the blood back toward the heart. And she said, when a fetus is in the womb of a woman and that little heart is beating, you see feet, you see legs, you see a head and some arms. She said they're getting nourishment there, but they serve no purpose at that point. They're just there. Because after a birth takes place, that's when the strength comes into the bones and into the vessels and begin to grow. Then the extremities have purpose. And then she imparted something else to me that I understood. She said, I used to work out in a refinery as a stillman's helper in a unit, when we shut units down. And I understood that because I was a pipe fitter welder out of 195 for a long time. I took part in shutting units down so they could repair them. And you start at the outer extremities turning valves off so no product comes into the unit that's explosive. You start turning the figure 8 blinds so that you block product flow. And it all comes from the outside in. And the last thing that gets turned off in that unit is in the control room. They turn the power off. Then the unit is completely dead, and they can rebuild it. And she said, God's doing the same thing with Linda right now. She said, it started with the heart as a fetus. It's going to end with the heart. I said, I always thought that when a person took their last breath is when they step over into heaven. And she said, the lungs are going to go before the heart does. So I told this to Jill and Jennifer the night on Jennifer's birthday that we were watching Linda there. We kept her out of pain with the morphine and things that they gave us. And we saw that she had a necklace, a gold necklace across her neck with that butterfly on it. And we could see the chain moving with the beat of the heart. And we saw the breathing went to 1 minute, and then she'd take a breath. And I'm thinking, who can hold their breath that long? Then 1.5 minutes before the next breath. Then 2 minutes. Then 2.5 minutes. And you could see the chain moving less and less. And Jennifer knew, and Jill knew, and Ronnie and Shane in the room with us, that when that chain stopped, it was over. The breathing stopped. 3 minutes later, we could see the chain stop. And that's when we knew she stepped over into heaven to be with God. And it truly was a life that started with the heart in that fetus, and it ended with the heart. And what I saw was a miracle of God, the way he worked. I was looking to see what was going on. You know, you heard stories about you see a spirit leave the body. Well, you know, I was aware, and I was thinking, okay, if I see one, I see one. But I wanted to see the heart. I wanted to see what he did. And I was okay with that. I was certainly at peace when I saw and realized that she was no longer in that decrepit body. And right away I got to feeling maybe a little bit selfish of wanting her back so I could hold her hand again. But I kept saying to myself, if she came back, she'd have to come back in that body, in that bad, painful body. because there wasn't another one she could come back in. And I said, I wouldn't want that for her. I wouldn't want that for her. So that was our last goodbye. And she said, I love you before, you know, maybe hours before that. And so we were good with that. Now we're building on it as we go forward. But now let me just tell you a little bit about between that first hello and that last goodbye. What I have here is a 2 terabyte hard drive that has 1,600 videotapes on there of home movies that I've taken since 1980. I bought the first video camera when we got married, or when we were dating, and then started taking pictures of everything. So I've got lots, you know, a lot of you in this room are on these. And I had an opportunity to go through them over the last several days and cherry pick and take pieces of it to make this video that you see today. When I look back on this, I started counting, well, how many days did we really take vacation? And it was like 540 days. We were outside the state of Texas somewhere on the move, and that was exciting. Then I counted the number of days that she had been in the hospital and doctor's offices, and it numbered more than that. So I know those were days we weren't traveling, but I had those opportunities to stay in the hospital with her overnight and take care of her all these years, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. But in 1972, my dad sponsored me into the Amway business and said, son, you're going to work from 8 to 5 and you'll have a living. But if you work from 5 to after sundown, you can make a life for yourself. And so I got busy. So by the time Linda and I met in 1980, I already had 8 years under my belt of building a large Amway organization around the nation. And I had hundreds of people. We were at Emerald Direct. We had lots of things going on. And I spoke at lots of meetings, lots of conferences. And so I was on the go before I ever met her. So when she plugs into me in 1981 and decides, finally says yes to my proposal, I know she knew what she was getting into, because we hit the road running. We went all over the country sponsoring people. That's not on here, but that's up here, our memories of and our business that we built. In 1983, we had Jennifer, and so we started taking her. Jill was in school. Jill couldn't go with us on most of the trips, but Jennifer could. And so we traveled everywhere. In 1987, we started our own company, Texas Computer Graphics. I still had an Amway business, and we started a Eureka Foods business that became larger than my Amway organization, and we were moving everywhere with that. When she was pregnant with Jennifer, the doctor said, listen, she's doing about a week. You don't need to fly down to St. Petersburg, Florida, but we went anyway to have a meeting with some people, and then we came back, and then Jennifer was born. So we have been on the move tremendously all our married life. I mean, from 1980 to now, we've covered some ground. We had a scorched earth policy of living. We burn it up. We wouldn't have it any other way. I can look back and say, no regrets. She had everything she ever wanted. We took care of her in her time of illness better than we could probably ever have had it. We've got Margaret and others that were here that worked with her, and so she lacked nothing. And so we have no regrets. I just want to say in closing, today represents the last page of our book of life. We close the chapter today on my life with Linda. Tomorrow we open a new page in a new chapter, and they're blank. God expects us to begin writing what our life is going to be like in days to come. And no doubt many of you your names are going to show up in our book as well. Memories are a powerful thing, and I recommend that none of you lose yours. I want to thank you again for being here, and I'll turn it over to the pastor now. And he's not in the room. There he is.